This is SpaceTime, Series 28, Episode 3, for broadcast on the 6th of January 2025. Coming up on SpaceTime, more on the fastest man-made object in history, NASA's Parker Solar Probe, the mystery of ultra-luminous X-ray sources, and a possible link between the Sun's solar cycle and the La Niña weather pattern. All that and more coming up on SpaceTime.
Welcome to SpaceTime with Stuart Gary.
Mission operations teams have confirmed NASA's mission to touch the Sun has survived its record-breaking close approach to the solar surface on December 24th. Breaking its previous record by flying just 6.1 million kilometres above the Sun's surface, NASA's Parker Solar Probe hurtled through the solar atmosphere at a blazing 155,520 kilometres per hour, faster than any man-made object has ever moved. A beacon tone received late on December the 26th by NASA's Deep Space Communications Facility at Tidbinbilla near Canberra confirmed the spacecraft had made it through its close encounter safely and was operating nominally. The close flyby was the first of more to come at this distance, allowing the spacecraft to conduct unrivaled science measurements with the potential to change our understanding of our nearest star. By studying the Sun close up, scientists can better understand its impacts throughout the solar system, including that on technology which we use daily here on Earth and in space. It also allows astronomers to learn more about the workings of stars across the universe, in order to aid science's search for habitable worlds beyond our home planet. But it hasn't been an easy journey. Parker Solar Probe has spent the last 6 years setting up for this moment. Launched back in 2018, the spacecraft used 7 flybys of Venus to gravitationally direct it ever closer to the Sun. And with its last Venus flyby, November the 6th, the spacecraft finally reached its optimal orbit. The oval-shaped orbit brings Parker to an ideal distance from the Sun every 3 months, close enough to study the star's mysterious processes, but not too close to become overwhelmed by the Sun's heat and damaging radiation. The spacecraft will remain in this orbit for the remainder of its primary mission. Flying this close to the Sun, Parker relies on a crucial carbon foam shield in order to protect it from the extreme heat of the upper solar atmosphere, or corona, which can exceed 1,000,000 degrees Celsius. In the hot but low-density corona, Parker's shield is heated to about 1,000 degrees Celsius. The shield was designed to reach temperatures of 1,500 degrees Celsius, that's hot enough to melt steel, while still keeping instruments behind it shaded at a comfortable room temperature of 21 degrees. By flying through the solar corona, Parker Solar Probe can take measurements that help scientists better understand how this region gets so hot. It can trace the origins of the solar wind, the constant flow of charged particles streaming out from the Sun, and it can discover how energetic particles are accelerated to almost half the speed of light. Previous passes have already aided scientists in understanding the Sun. When the spacecraft first passed into the solar atmosphere back in 2021, it found that the outer boundary of the corona was wrinkled with spikes and valleys. That's contrary to what was expected. Parker also pinpointed the origin of important zigzag-shaped structures in the solar wind known as switchbacks at the visible surface of the Sun, the photosphere. Since that initial pass into the Sun, the spacecraft's been spending more and more time in the corona, where most of the critical physical processes occur. Astronomers now understand the solar wind and its acceleration away from the Sun, and this close approach has given them more data to understand how it's accelerated closer in. Parker Solar Probes also made discoveries across the inner solar system. Observations showed how massive solar eruptions called coronal mass ejections vacuum up dust as they sweep across the solar system. And other observations have revealed unexpected findings about solar energetic particles. Flybys of Venus have documented the planet's natural radio emissions from its atmosphere, as well as the first complete image of its orbital dust ring. So far, Parker's still only transmitted that it's safe and operating nominally. But soon it'll be far enough away from the Sun that it'll be able to downlink all the data it's collected during this latest solar pass. The data that will be coming down from the spacecraft will be fresh information about a place that we, as humanity, have never been, but which we rely on for our very existence. This report from NASA TV.
In 1958, scientists put a vision that we need to fly a spacecraft within the atmosphere of the sun. But it is so challenging, extremely difficult to realize, that it took us 6 decades to build a system that can fly safely and reliably within the atmosphere of a star.
3, 2, 1, 0. Liftoff of the mighty Delta IV Heavy rocket with NASA's Parker Solar Probe, a daring mission to shed light on the mysteries of our closest star, the Sun.
It looked like we had a hit there for a second.
Yes, Nick. I believe we do have a detection of beacon tone 1.
There it is. See it? There it is.
Parker Solar Probe is
3.8 million miles from the surface of the sun.
It is so incredible to just realize this is the moment that we designed this mission for. 3.8 million miles may not sound that close, but if I put the sun and the Earth 1 meter apart, Parker Solar Probe would be 4 centimeters from the sun. It's the closest human-made object to a star and also the fastest, traveling at 430,000 miles an hour. I mean, we're flying through the atmosphere of a star. That's not easy to do. It's something we've never done before.
This is our first close encounter with a star, and it's really just amazing. This area that Parker is going into is just so crucial to our understanding of the sun and its impact on the Earth.
That solar interaction, that space weather, those billions of tons of material that the sun can throw at us interacts with our power grids, can interact with our technology. So it's really important to understand them at their source and how they get all that energy.
When we were thinking about designing a spacecraft to go to someplace that had never been before, and it's actually going there to study the sun, and so you're kind of saying, what am I designing? What are the environments it's designing for?
It has to go from the deepest, coldest space to a very warm area and keep everything working at a little bit above room temperature.
It's designed to go to such an extreme environment. You look at it, and it doesn't quite look like most other spacecraft. The whole thing is designed such that the heat shield is taking most of the brunt of the heat of the sun. The heat shield will be at about 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit, and it's protecting the spacecraft. So the spacecraft's actually basically at room temperature.
This is such a great feat of engineering, and it really shows how capable we are in space.
This is something that we've been wanting to do since 1958 when it was first mentioned, and the technical problems that had to be overcome in order to achieve it, it's just monumental to be able to get a spacecraft this close to the sun.
To get close to the sun is not easy. It looks like from Earth to the sun, not that far. The key issue is energy. In order for Parker to get close to the sun, we needed to lose a lot of Parker's speed possessed at Earth's orbit. Fortunately, I was able to create a trajectory with 7 Venus flyby.
The mission uses Venus in order to actually change its angular momentum and slow down to actually go closer and closer to the sun.
Over the course of about 6 years and the 7 flybys, we were able to move closer to the sun, and each time unraveling a little bit more of the mysteries of the sun as we get data from places that no spacecraft has ever been before.
It's the only star in our galaxy that we can actually go visit, and that's what makes it so magical.
By flying within the atmosphere of the sun, we are basically tracing the fingerprints of the physical mechanisms of the sun. We now view the sun in a different way. When you look at images from Parker Solar Probe, oh my goodness, they are extremely, extremely complex. And that complexity, for us, it's a new science that we need to investigate, we need to understand.
The things that we've learned over the years that Parker has been in orbit have been amazing. They've challenged our ideas about how the solar wind is made, about how the sun works, about some of these fundamental things that are going on.
There's a lot of pride and excitement for this closest approach. So much effort and so many people have worked on this.
I think it really took the teamwork and synergy of engineers and scientists and administrators and a lot of different people to think this mission up.
And in that report from NASA TV, we heard from Parker Project scientist Noor Wafi from the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory, NASA's Science Mission Directorate Chief Nikki Fox, NASA's Heliophysics Director Joseph Westlake, Kelly Carec, also from NASA Heliophysics, and from Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory, Lead Heat Shield Engineer Betsy Cogden, Mission Systems Engineer John Wurzberger, and Parker Mission Engineer Yamping Gao. This is Space Time. Still to come, astronomers detect unusual flaring activity in a mysterious object known as an ultraluminous X-ray source, and a possible link between the Sun's solar cycle and Earth's La Nina weather patterns. All that and more still to come on Space Time. Astronomers studying a mysterious object known as an ultraluminous X-ray source have detected strange flaring activity. First discovered back in the 1980s by the Einstein Observatory, ultraluminous X-ray sources are point sources of intense X-ray energy. They're less luminous than active galactic nuclei, which are caused by feeding supermassive black holes, but consistently more luminous than any known stellar process. Although the Milky Way galaxy has no known ultraluminous X-ray sources, most galaxies that have been studied so far have at least one, and some have several. Astronomers use the XMM Newton, NuSTAR, Chandra and Swift space telescopes to observe an ultraluminous X-ray source known as X7. It's one of two ultraluminous X-ray sources, the other designated X10, located in the intermittent spiral galaxy NGC 4559, some 29 million light-years away in the constellation Coma Berenices. A report on the pre-press physics website archive.org says X7's long-term X-ray light curve shows flux variations by up to a factor of 6 over just a few hours. Now, this sort of activity wasn't seen in any earlier X-ray observations of X7, and it manifests only when the source is at its highest observed luminosities. During the peak of these flares, the luminosity was a factor of 3 higher than pre-flare luminosity. That indicates the maximum variability of the source can span almost an order of magnitude. Right now, astronomers think that most ultraluminous X-ray sources are in fact background quasars, powerful jets produced by feeding supermassive black holes. But another source could be feeding intermediate mass black holes, while a third possibility are unusually bright supernova remnants, at least on short timescales. This is Space Time. Still to come, a possible link between the Sun's solar cycle and Earth's La Nina weather patterns, and later in the science report, the discovery of a spectacular 166 million-year-old dinosaur trackway in Oxfordshire. All that and more still to come on Space Time. A new study shows a correlation between the end of the Sun's 11-year solar cycle and a switch from El Niño to La Nina weather patterns in the Pacific Ocean. The findings, reported in the journal Earth and Space Sciences, suggest that solar variability may be driving seasonal weather variability here on Earth. Now, if this connection holds up, it could significantly improve the predictability of the largest El Niño and La Nina weather events. These have major seasonal climatic effects on Earth. For example, eastern Australia becomes drier and more drought-prone during an El Niño, while it becomes wetter and more flood-prone during a La Nina event. And the southern United States tends to be warmer and drier during La Nina, while the northern US tends to be colder and wetter. The Sun's 11-year solar cycle involves a regular polarity flip of the Sun's magnetic field at solar minimum. The magnetic north pole becomes magnetic south, and the magnetic south pole becomes magnetic north. And this coincides with a steady increase in sunspot activity, solar flares, and coronal mass ejections on the Sun's surface. These climax around solar maximum, about 5.5 years after solar minimum. The violent upheaval then gradually dissipates as the Sun moves back to solar minimum and the start of the next solar cycle. The appearance and disappearance of sunspots, the outwardly visible signs of solar variability, have been observed by humans for hundreds of years. The waxing and waning of the number of sunspots takes place over approximately 11-year cycles, but these cycles do not have distinct beginnings and ends. This fuzziness in the length of any particular solar cycle has made it challenging for scientists to match up the 11-year solar cycle with changes happening on Earth. In this new study, the authors rely on what they're describing as a more precise 22-year clock for solar activity. This 22-year cycle begins when oppositely charged magnetic bands that wrap around the Sun appear near the star's polar latitudes. Now, over the cycle, these bands migrate towards the solar equator, causing sunspots to appear as they travel across mid-latitudes. The cycle ends when the bands meet in the middle, mutually annihilating one another in what the authors are calling a terminator event. And it's these terminators which provide exact guideposts for the end of one solar cycle and the beginning of the next. The authors then impose these terminator events over sea surface temperatures in the tropical Pacific stretching back to 1960. Amazingly, they found that the 5 terminator events that occurred between that time and 2010-2011 all coincided with a flip from an El Niño, when the Central Eastern Pacific sea surface temperatures are warmer than average, to a La Niña, when the Central Eastern Pacific sea surface temperatures are cooler than average. And the end of the most recent solar cycle, 24, in 2019, also coincided with the beginning of a La Niña event. The authors then undertook a number of statistical analyses to determine the likelihood that this correlation was just a fluke, finding there was only 1 in 5,000 chance or less of all 5 terminator events included in the study randomly coinciding with a flip in ocean temperatures. Now that a 6th terminator event and the corresponding start of the new solar cycle 25 in late 2019 also coincided with a La Niña event, the chances of it all being a random occurrence becomes even more remote. While the authors haven't determined what causes this apparent correlation, they're looking at the influence of the Sun's magnetic field on the amount of cosmic rays that penetrate the solar system and ultimately bombard the Earth. However, a robust physical link between cosmic ray variations and climate has yet to be determined. This is SpaceTime. And time now to take a brief look at some of the other stories making news in science this week with the Science Report. A new study has found increases in ambient air pollution, especially if sustained for several days, appears to correlate with a higher risk of hospitalization for people suffering from schizophrenia. The findings, reported in the Journal of the American Medical Association, looked at over 800,000 hospitalizations for schizophrenia in 250 Chinese cities and short-term increases in a range of air pollutants. Scientists found the link was strongest for nitrogen dioxide pollution, which could account for over 6% of hospitalizations. The authors say that these short-term relative increases, rather than only absolute concentrations of air pollution, should be factored in when targeting intervention strategies. A new study suggests that eating more fruits and vegetables could help reduce depression. Although the benefits of high fruit and vegetable intake has previously been reported, few studies have focused on adults aged over 45. The new research by the University of New South Wales assessed associations between fruit and vegetable intake and depressive symptoms over 11 years in 3,483 twins from Australia, Denmark, Sweden and the United States. The findings, published in the journal Scientific Reports, shows that higher intakes of both fruit and vegetables were associated with lower symptoms of depression over time. A low intake of fruit on average is considered to be 0.3 serves per day, while a low intake of vegetables is considered to be 0.5 serves daily, whereas high fruit intake was 2.1 serves per day and high vegetable intake was 2 serves daily. Interestingly, the total fruit and vegetable consumption in the high category still fell notably below the dietary recommendations for most countries. Paleontologists have released details of a 166 million-year-old dinosaur trackway uncovered in an Oxfordshire limestone quarry. The footprints belong to a herbivorous Cetiosaurus sauropod and a Megalosaurus theropod carnivore, and were made in what was once a warm, shallow lagoon. They were discovered by a quarry worker clearing clay with a digger. Scientists have now unearthed around 200 large footprints in 5 separate trackways in the quarry, stretching up to 150 metres in length. Well, it seems a much-anticipated United States Congressional hearing into evidence for the existence of unidentified anomalous phenomena has turned out to be a major flop, with nothing but third-person hearsay and vague, unsubstantiated claims. It was meant to be the big reveal, where those behind all the UFO claims and those exposing the cover-up would come forward and tell all under congressional protection from prosecution. Hope for actual hard evidence, such as the presentation of actual alien technology or first-person testimony, was non-existent. Tim Mendham from Australian Skeptics says he, for one, isn't surprised.
This is the latest hearing in the US Congress. The House Review Committee always sort of interviews all these different sort of government departments. Most countries have these, and they say, how are you going? Are you spending money correctly? Blah, blah, blah. And so this one's popped up about UFOs, same as one last year popped up about UFOs, with people who are reasonable authorities, at least in their proper career jobs, not the people who sound good. Retired Rear Admiral, I think, was one of these, speaking to this Congress committee about the UFO, or UAP, as it's called these days, work that's being undertaken by the government. And these people are always saying that the government's covering up, they've got the technology, if worst case, they've got the alien bodies, etc., and they're developing all these products. And one day, all of this is going to be revealed. And the trouble is, these people who do front up to Congress hearings, etc., I don't think they've ever seen it, but they've heard about it. And so it's all third-person testimony. They don't, but I know someone who did, or I know someone and they know someone who has seen an alien body or something. UFO proponents have been talking this way for 70 years. At any day now, the evidence is going to be revealed, and everyone would be shocked at the government cover-up and that they really do have spaceships under the Nevada desert or something like that. And it hasn't happened, and this was no better. This was the great day for the big reveal, and nothing was revealed. It's just claims, including some of the people who were there supposedly going to have the big reveal, were pointing out that, there's unidentified things out there, but, maybe they'll be identified. And that's the whole problem. That's what UFOs and UAPs are. They're unidentified. And the only reason they're being called up as aliens is because we don't know what they are. They very well might be identified one day, and most of these things are identified, the vast majority. But yep, some will probably remain unidentified, not enough witness testimony, a bit unreliable, no records of them, etc., 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 or just unclear, a vague sort of thing that couldn't be identified, unidentified. This was the big thing. A UFO community saying, fantastic, it's all going to be revealed. Someone's going to drop the information on the desk in front of Congress and say, here you go, here's the evidence, here's where it's at, or the photos, or whatever. No. Didn't happen. Didn't happen last year. Hasn't happened. Anything definitive, anything that hasn't been questioned for 70 years. And yet they keep saying, any day now, it'll be revealed within 12 months. And I've heard UFO people say that all the time. And they always find excuses, mainly because the government's cover-up is very good, or people are frightened to reveal the truth that they know because they're going to be sacked or intimidated or laughed at, whatever. That might be true. Also, it might be true that they don't know anything. And there are people who are making wild claims that they haven't then just substantiated. Journalists who are saying it's off the record, or I don't want to reveal my sources. Australian journalist who's been doing this for a couple of years, pointing out that there's 11, 12, 13 enormous spaceships buried around the Earth, often with a big building on top of them. People were wondering where, which buildings, etc. They did say not in the US, so it might be under the Sydney Opera House or something, or CERN in Europe, or the Vatican, or who knows what. And all you have to do is ask, well, where are they? Surely we can sort of put a little hole down and find this UFO and say, oh, no, I can't do that because we will reveal the sources. Don't reveal the sources, just tell us where it is, and then we can go and have a look. Is this enormous, really enormous, building-sized flying saucers are buried somewhere? They should be pretty easy to find. But no, 70 years, no evidence put forward, always going to be any day now. That excuse is used every time to raise journalists and to raise the interest of newspapers and shock jocks and that sort of stuff.
Of course, the latest ones are the drones flying over US bases that have been in the headlines of late. And I looked at those pictures and straight away I said, well, that's a high-flying airliner, an Airbus or a Boeing 737 or something. And lo and behold, a week later, Mick West comes out with exactly the same conclusion. So
Yeah, Mick West is very useful. He did the same with the famous Pentagon videos. They were these top-secret videos that everyone knew about, and they finally sort of released them and said, here they are, this is what some of our pilots have seen. I think Mick West spent about 5 minutes on each of them and explained what they were. So he's very much worth seeking out, Mick West.
Well, the reason the Pentagon don't want to admit anything, because what it does, it shows just how inefficient the most advanced optical technology we have on our most advanced fighter jets really is.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. It picks up a lot of things which they should know better as to what they are. But the truth is out there, and it's amazing actually some of these people in this latest Congress hearing said exactly that. The truth is out there. All we have to do is find it. Well, maybe the truth is not out there. By saying this exists but I have no evidence for it doesn't mean it exists. It just means that you don't know what you're talking about.
One thing I've found through my many years on this planet, studying you people, is that most politicians and most senior bureaucrats aren't playing some four-dimensional Machiavellian chess game. They really aren't that bright, and they really are just doing the first thing that comes to mind.
Yes, that's right. I mean, the people asking the questions, at these Congress things you get both sorts. People asking with a wry smile, is this what you're claiming? And someone else with their eyes wide open saying, wow, this must be true. They do. They run a gamut of brightness or lack of brightness, and the people they're interviewing, people who are presenting, giving evidence, tend to have a bit better qualifications than the politicians do. So naturally the politicians believe them.
That's Tim Mindham from Australian Skeptics. And that's the show for now. SpaceTime is available every Monday, Wednesday and Friday through Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Podcast, Pocket Casts, Spotify, Acast, Amazon Music, Bytes.com, SoundCloud, YouTube, your favourite podcast download provider, and from spacetimewithstuartgary.com. SpaceTime's also broadcast through the National Science Foundation on Science Zone Radio and on both iHeartRadio and TuneIn Radio. And you can help to support our show by visiting the SpaceTime store for a range of promotional merchandising goodies, or by becoming a SpaceTime patron, which gives you access to triple-episode commercial-free versions of the show, as well as lots of bonus audio content which doesn't go to air, access to our exclusive Facebook group, and other rewards. Just go to spacetimewithstuartgary.com for full details.
You've been listening to SpaceTime with Stuart Gary. This has been another quality podcast production from Bytes.com.